Welcome to Yard Talk. I'm Doug.
Hi, I'm Greg.
I'm a trained landscape architect and I believe in strong design.
I'm a born naturalist and I think that good design can create great backyard wildlife habitat.
As you'll see, we sometimes look at gardens in different ways.
But we both agree that the natural approach to lawn and garden care is the best.
We're here to answer some of the many questions we hear from homeowners all over King County who call in to the Natural Lawn and Garden Hotline.
We'll show you cutting-edge techniques to save you time and money without poisoning our children, our pets, or the environment.
Ah, the joys of gardening. Time outside that can be the perfect retreat from noise, stress, and a busy life.
It is also a great place for family and friends, especially if you know the area is not soaked with pesticides and herbicides.
Yeah, but you wouldn't be a gardener if you weren't sometimes bothered by these weeds.
Yep, these pesky little guys just bug about all of us. But you don't have to spend all your free time fighting weeds, and you don't have to use chemicals to blast them out either.
No, many weeds that enter our garden can easily be controlled with a little bit of diligence. Of course, we favor natural gardening techniques. Coming up, we'll show you how you can spend less time fighting weeds so you have more time for other things.
We'll also introduce you to a whole herd of crazy weed-munching monsters for hire. But before we cue the goats, we want to talk to you about some weeds that are a lot more than a gardener's nuisance. Noxious weeds can be a real danger to our environment.
Yep, these aggressive alien invaders can wreak havoc on our native plants and trees. Some weeds are so damaging, landowners are required by law to control them. To find out more, we'll talk with Sasha from the King County Noxious Weed Control Program. We're back here with Sasha in an alley filled with a dreaded giant hogweed. Sasha, what is this stuff exactly and why is it considered noxious?
Well, Doug, giant hogweed is one of the most serious noxious weeds we have in Washington State. Originally it was planted in gardens and it has escaped into hundreds of alleys and backyards and ravines and parks. It is a public health hazard. I don't know if you're aware, but if you can get the sap on your skin, it makes your skin hypersensitive to sunlight. And the sunlight causes burns and blisters. They're very painful and the scars can last for several years. This is a photo of a young boy who got the hogweed on his skin by holding the hogweed up to his eye. And he then got the scars around him. You can see the bandages and the scars that remained after that. Now, giant hogweed is also very well adapted to our climate. It grows very well here, very vigorous as you can see, and it spreads easily by seed. And the plants then can outcompete just about any other plants that they grow with, and they push out the other plants.
So what exactly makes it noxious as opposed to, say, something in the yard?
Well, a noxious weed, these are non-native plants. They were brought here from elsewhere, often as an ornamental, sometimes by accident. And these plants are really well adapted to our climate. Plus, they have the unfair advantage of they don't bring their natural enemies with them. And so the plants and the plant diseases and the insects that are here locally are not really affecting them. And so they're not kept in check by those, and they can spread aggressively. In addition, these plants can outcompete native plants and they can cause serious environmental damage.
And what can homeowners do about noxious weeds if they happen to have them?
That's an excellent question. The number one thing is they need to not plant weedy plants. So get familiar with the noxious weed list, and they can refer to our website for that. And ask the nurseries, is this a plant that's going to self-seed and spread in my yard? Number two, it's really important to think about how you spread noxious weeds. So clean your dogs after they run through an area that has weeds, clean your own boots and your tools, your cars and your boats when you go fishing. That's really important. And also, think about what you're doing with your plants. If you have an aquarium, never dump your aquarium into open natural water. The noxious weeds that we have in our water, a lot of them came from aquariums, from people dumping them. And then likewise, if you have you know, your yard waste and you dump that in the ravine behind you, that can cause serious problems. A lot of garden weeds can spread from garden clippings.
Right.
And then on a positive note, join work parties and help remove the weeds from the natural areas and restore them to the native plants.
So Sasha, we're going to talk today about getting rid of these hogweed. They've already been, these is like headless hogweed, they've been deflowered. What's the thing?
That's right, yeah, you notice these don't have any flowers on them.
Yeah.
Someone has come along, one of the neighbors actually came and cut all the flowers off of this plant, and that is the first step to controlling it. You need to make sure that the seeds aren't going to spread. So this is what they would look like, but about twice the size if they were full grown. And when this plant is in flower, it's about 15 feet tall, so it's quite large.
So we're going to figure out how to dig these out of the ground, or?
Yeah, I need to get myself ready, get some tools, and I'll show you how to do it.
All right, let's do it.
Wear good sturdy boots, long pants, long sleeves, and good sturdy gloves. Next, you're going to want to cut off any fully open flower heads, especially those with seeds forming, and carefully put those in a garbage bag. You're going to want to dig up all of the plants, including as much root as possible.
Whether you're battling noxious weeds or just our regular garden variety, it's important to have a plan. First, don't give weeds a chance. They thrive on bare soil, so smother them out with mulch or crowd them out with ground covers. Second, accept a few weeds in your lawn. 10 to 20% weeds is barely noticeable by most people. Stay ahead of the game by targeting the worst, like dandelions, with a good weed puller. Third, use the least toxic controls, like vinegar or citrus-based products. When applied on a hot day in an open area, they can work great. Last, if for some reason you must use chemicals, be smart and only spot spray with the least toxic herbicide. If you have to apply more than that, you probably need a soil or landscape design solution. Remember, when battling weeds, mulch for prevention, pull the worst weeds by hand, use least toxic solutions, spot spray or improve conditions.
I've snuck off to a corner of Doug's yard to see if even a landscape architect like Doug has weeds. And guess what? He does. He has quite a wide assortment, actually. Over here we have one of my worst enemies. It's called Herb Robert, or Stinky Bob. Smells bad, it's an annual, shoots seeds all over the place. Nasty plant. Next to it we have the non-native oxalis, or also called creeping wood sorrel, and it's a perennial that spreads out all over the landscape. And also we have a holly tree that's been planted here by the birds that we want to get out soon before it grows up, fruits, and then its seeds will be spread all over the landscape. We find holly a lot now spread out into the natural areas where it outcompetes our native plants out in those areas. Now for weeds that have a shallow root system, a tool like this works great for going in there. You can just scrape out and get the entire roots of this Stinky Bob here, and it's a goner. We don't have to worry about it. I got it before it went to seed, so that'll help reduce Doug's weed problem. Now, this also will work for like the oxalis, but because it spreads out quite a bit, you have to be sure to really rake through it and get those roots out. But this tool works great for that too. Now for the holly, it has a deep tap root. So, and same with dandelions or cat's ear, that sort of thing. For that, I use a tool like this. And I can really get down there deep and get the whole root system of that holly, and it won't come back, and it's a goner too. Works great for dandelions also. I'm here at stunning Fern Cove on Vashon Island. This beautiful place is being protected by Vashon Park District and the Vashon Maury Island Land Trust. But they have a problem. They got weeds. The technique they're using down here to help control pepperweed is by installing this weed fabric. Now the advantage to using the weed fabric is really that it provides long-term control of the weeds until they're totally dead without having to use any herbicides. One other advantage is you can also install plants directly through it by cutting holes. So what they've done down here is gone in and laid this over the patch of pepperweed, but you could also do this over blackberries or other really aggressive weeds. You can install this fabric, leave it for a couple of years, plant through it, get the planting started, and then you can go ahead later and take up the fabric and reuse it someplace else. Works great. Now some people in their home landscapes, they install weed fabric and then put a bunch of bark on top of it. I'm not a big fan of that because what happens is as the fabric breaks down and gets tears in it, you end up with little bits of fabric scattered throughout your landscape and long after it's effective. So by putting it on top, you can remove it later. Now, it may not be the most aesthetic choice in some circumstances, but if you have an area that's full of blackberry, it's a great way to go. Ivy is another really tough weed to get rid of. Now, lots of people don't think of it as a weed. They think it looks beautiful in the landscape, evergreen spreading throughout. But that's the problem. Not only does it spread across your land this way, it goes up into your trees, it spreads through the forest and turns the trees into big sails and they topple in the wind. You gotta get rid of that stuff. And I'm gonna show you how. Now, ivy, fortunately, isn't that tough to get rid of. You don't have to climb 100 feet up into the tree and rip it all down. It gets all its food from the ground. So I just have a set of pruners here. I'm going along, snipping off the ivy and making sure I get each and every stem. Now, sometimes ivy gets stuck on there pretty good and it takes a little bit of effort to pry it off, but it's not too hard. And you can see I'm just going around the tree, cutting all this stuff off. Once you get it off the trunk, you can just keep on following the roots away. The first priority though is to get it so it's not killing the trees. Then go after the roots. You can use different tools to pull it away. And you can see they're very long roots. But once you get them out, you can pile them up on a tarp. If you just leave them on the ground, they'll re-root. This stuff's amazing. But dry it out on a tarp, turn it into compost, and you're good to go.
Now for the weed control method that we've all been waiting for. Time to cue the goats.
These munching mammals can really go to town on unsightly weeds, and guess what? They're for hire.
These goats may be cute and furry, but these goats are professionals. Professional weed eaters, that is. They work in a herd devouring blackberries, Scotch broom, and other noxious weeds. They are the ultimate organic weed control system.
And this is Gouda.
Tammy Dunnigan's business on Vashon Island is called Rent a Ruminant.
She comes from the cheese line of goats.
Her herd of goats have spent the last few days mowing through the weeds on this lot.
They love blackberry, it's one of their favorite things. They love Scotch broom certain times of the year. They love nettle certain times of the year. Grasses.
The horsetail we saw.
Horsetail, alder, they love ivy, all different kinds of ferns they'll eat. There's some they shouldn't eat, but they will eat that.
And you have sheep for eating grass too.
Correct, yeah. Sheep are more of a grazer.
And the ivy on that tree there.
Yeah, that tree had ivy going up the trunk there, you can see it. And they came in and they eat everything they can reach. They'll stand on their hind legs and get up there, and then they leave the vines, which they so nicely strip so that we can see them. Right. And they're very visible, and then you can just go in and cut the vines.
What won't they eat?
Huckleberry is one of the things they don't like. There's a few types of plants and weeds that must have a bad taste, and I can't tell exactly what they are because they mostly eat almost anything that's green.
Who's most likely to hire your services?
I get a lot of private landowners for big and small jobs. I can take the sheep into somebody's backyard, literally, to do their lawn, which is always interesting to have the sheep show up in your neighborhood. And then I get a lot of people like, for example, this gentleman who has, 7 or 8 acres that he's got areas that he has problems with. He wanted to get rid of his blackberries and some of the invasives here so he can go back in and reforest this or revegetation it or whatever you want to call it to make it more native and healthier. I get business owners. I've had people call me from out of state and off island quite frequently to do a project like at a business that has an overgrown area that they want something done. And municipalities have also called me. I do work for the Vashon Parks Department and the water districts over here. And I'm getting more of those kind of accounts as time goes on.
And even parties?
Yes, they're becoming a very popular party favor. I have people planning birthday parties around when the goats are going to arrive, because they're really they're an experience to have. They're very sweet, loving animals, and they're very dog-like. Really fun to have around. They're very zen.
And I noticed they fertilize while they go, so you
I
have,
charge no extra for that.
No extra for
Yeah,
that.
that's free. They fertilize, they aerate, and what's really neat is that I've taken them to places, and when I've gone back the next year, it's been the ground and the grass has been so much healthier than it was the first time they were there.
And what's going to happen now that they've chomped all this down? What's going to happen to this area? What's the next step?
The grass will grow back that's here, even though they've eaten all this down. Just recently, it'll come back very healthy, and you know, he just wants to kind of reclaim this area and make it a healthy little ecosystem.
Well, there you have it, folks. More tips for your garden the natural yard care way. If you have questions of your own, call the Lawn and Garden hotline and tell them you have a question for Doug and Greg. And who knows, you may see us answer it on the air.
And don't forget about our new online native plant guide. It will help you pick out some great native plants that will thrive in your garden, and it'll keep those weeds at bay.
Have a healthy garden.
And a healthy family too.